The cold, crisp air of a Canadian night wrapped around Charles Bennett as he trudged through the snow-covered field, flashlight in hand. A retired military strategist, Charles had traded the chaos of battle for the tranquility of rural life, tending to his farm far from the world's noise. Tonight, however, was anything but peaceful. A blinding light had streaked across the sky, crashing into the nearby woods, and curiosity had driven him from the warmth of his home. Charles pushed through the dense underbrush, the smell of burning metal growing stronger. His flashlight beam fell on a smoking crater, revealing a sleek, alien spacecraft. Its hull was dented and scorched, clearly the result of a violent impact. He approached cautiously, his military instincts kicking in despite years of disuse. From the wreckage emerged three figures, each distinct yet uniformly alien. Their eyes glowed with an inner light, and their skin shimmered with an iridescent hue. Charles's heart raced, but he steadied himself, reminding himself that fear would accomplish nothing. "Help, please," one of the aliens, the tallest of the three, spoke in surprisingly clear English, though her voice had an ethereal quality. Charles noted the desperation in her eyes, a stark contrast to her otherwise composed demeanor. "Who are you?" Charles asked, his voice steady but wary. "I am Alara, and these are my companions, Rena and Zyla. We mean you no harm. Our ship malfunctioned, and we crashed. We are explorers from a distant galaxy, seeking refuge from constant warfare." Charles's mind raced. Aliens seeking refuge on Earth? The implications were staggering. "You're lucky to have found me and not someone else. We need to get you out of here before more people come looking." He gestured for them to follow, and they moved as swiftly as their injuries allowed. The journey back to his farmhouse was arduous, the snow making every step a challenge. Charles's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, trying to make sense of the situation. Once inside, he quickly assessed their injuries. Alara had a deep gash on her arm, Rena was limping, and Zyla appeared to have a concussion. Despite their advanced technology, they were vulnerable. As he treated their wounds, the aliens shared their story. Their galaxy had been ravaged by endless conflicts, their species scattered and desperate. They had embarked on a mission to find a peaceful world, a place where they could rebuild. Earth had seemed promising, but now they were stranded. Charles listened intently, the weight of their words sinking in. He felt a pang of empathy, their struggle mirrored his own, albeit on a much grander scale. The scars of his military past were deep, and he understood all too well the desire for peace. Their conversation was interrupted by the distant hum of engines. Charles's eyes narrowed. "Government drones. They must have detected your crash." Panic flashed across Alara's face. "What do we do?" Charles thought quickly. "We need to move, now. There's an old bunker nearby, a remnant from the Cold War. It's off the grid and should be safe." Gathering what supplies they could, Charles led the aliens through the back fields. The drones were closer now, their searchlights piercing the darkness. They reached the bunker just in time, slipping inside and sealing the heavy door behind them. The bunker was cramped but secure. As they settled in, Charles's old military radio crackled to life. A coded message from the agency monitoring extraterrestrial activities confirmed his fears. They were actively searching the area. "We're safe for now," he said, turning to the aliens. "But they'll keep looking. We need a plan to get you off this planet before they find you." Alara nodded, gratitude evident in her eyes. "Thank you, Charles. Your help means more than you know." Charles glanced around the bunker, his mind already working on an escape plan. He knew the terrain well and had the skills to outmaneuver the government agents. "Rest for now. We move at first light." As the night wore on, Charles couldn't help but reflect on the irony of his situation. He had sought solitude to escape his past, yet here he was, drawn back into a conflict that was far beyond anything he had faced before. But for the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose. A chance to protect rather than destroy. The first light of dawn filtered through the narrow windows of the bunker, casting a faint glow over the makeshift shelter. Charles Bennett stood guard, his senses sharp despite the early hour. The government agents were out there, searching, and he had to stay vigilant. Elara, Rena, and Zyla stirred from their rest, their alien forms still unfamiliar yet somehow reassuring in their vulnerability. They had shared their stories of a galaxy ravaged by unending wars, their hope for finding peace, and their desperation that had led them to Earth. "How are you feeling?" Charles asked, his voice low to avoid startling them. Elara, cradling her injured arm, managed a small smile. "Better, thanks to you. We owe you our lives." Charles waved off the gratitude. "Just doing what anyone with a conscience would. But we can't stay here forever. They'll find us eventually. We need to figure out our next move." Rena, the most analytical of the trio, leaned forward. "Your knowledge of this area is invaluable. We need your help to evade capture and repair our ship. Can you guide us to a place where we can work in safety?" Charles considered this. The old cabin deep in the forest came to mind. It was remote, off the beaten path, and had the tools they needed. "I know a place. It'll take a few hours to get there, but it's safe and secluded. We'll move at dusk." The day passed slowly, each of them on edge, listening for any sign of approaching danger. Charles used the time to gather supplies and plan their route. The aliens, though curious about their surroundings, focused on healing and preparing for the journey ahead. As dusk approached, they set out, keeping to the dense woods to avoid detection. Charles led the way, his military training guiding their steps. The forest was alive with sounds, rustling leaves, distant bird calls, but they moved silently, a sense of urgency propelling them forward. They reached the cabin just as the sky turned a deep shade of twilight. Charles ushered them inside, quickly securing the area. "We should be safe here. It's off any known paths, and the trees provide good cover." Zyla, who had been quiet for most of the journey, finally spoke. "Charles, why are you helping us? You risk your life for strangers." Charles paused, the weight of her question heavy. "I spent years in the military, part of conflicts that seemed never-ending. I came here to escape that, to find peace. When I found you, it reminded me that running away doesn't solve anything. Sometimes, you have to stand and help those in need." Rena nodded. "Your world is different from ours. Here, there is hope for peace, for sanctuary. We see that now, thanks to you." Their conversation was interrupted by a low hum. Charles tensed, peering through the window. In the distance, he saw the faint glow of searchlights. "They're closer than I thought. We need to stay alert." The next few days were a test of endurance and trust. Charles worked with the aliens to repair their ship, using the tools and materials available in the cabin. He was impressed by their technology and their ingenuity. Elara, despite her injury, proved to be an adept mechanic, while Rena and Zyla took turns keeping watch and scouting the area. During their downtime, they shared more about their respective worlds. Charles learned about the alien homeworlds, their cultures, and the brutal conflicts that had driven them to seek refuge. The aliens, in turn, were fascinated by Earth's history, its beauty, and the resilience of its people. One evening, as they sat around a small fire, Charles asked a question that had been on his mind. "If you find peace here, what will you do next?" Elara's eyes shimmered with emotion. "We will bring others, those who are weary of fighting and longing for peace. We will help them rebuild, just as you have helped us." Their conversation was cut short by a sudden noise, a twig snapping outside the cabin. Charles motioned for silence, his hand reaching for the old rifle he kept for emergencies. He moved to the window, peering into the darkness. Shadows moved between the trees. "They found us," he whispered, his heart pounding. "We need to move now. Elara, Rena, and Zyla quickly gathered their belongings, their movements precise and efficient. Charles led them out the back, guiding them through the thick underbrush. The agents were close, but Charles knew the terrain better. They reached a narrow ravine, the only escape route. Charles helped the aliens across, one by one, the sound of pursuit growing louder. As they reached the other side, Charles turned to see a beam of light sweep across the forest floor, just missing them. "Keep moving," he urged, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. They pressed on, the darkness of the forest their only shield. Charles knew the agents wouldn't give up easily, but he was determined to protect his new friends. They had come too far to be caught now. The dense forest provided a temporary refuge as Charles Bennett led Elara, Rena, and Zyla deeper into the Canadian wilderness. The first light of dawn had begun to seep through the canopy, casting long shadows that danced with the movement of the leaves. Charles paused, listening intently to the sounds of the forest, ensuring they weren't being followed. "We should be safe for a while, but we need to stay alert," Charles said, his voice barely above a whisper. The aliens nodded, their expressions serious. They had come to trust his instincts, knowing that his experience and knowledge were their best chances of survival. They pressed on, reaching a secluded cave that Charles had scouted years ago. It was hidden from view and provided the perfect cover for their next steps. As they settled inside, Charles set about creating a makeshift workshop, using the limited tools and materials they had brought with them. "We need to figure out how to repair your ship," Charles said, glancing at the aliens. "I can help with the basics, but your technology is far beyond anything I'm familiar with." Elara stepped forward, her eyes meeting his. "We have the knowledge, but we need certain elements that aren't available here. We'll have to improvise." Charles nodded. "We'll start with what we have and see what we can do. Meanwhile, we need to keep an eye on the agents. They're getting closer every day." As they worked, the bond between Charles and the aliens deepened. They shared stories of their worlds, their cultures, and their struggles. Charles learned that Elara was a skilled engineer, Rena a strategist, and Zyla a healer. Their abilities complemented each other, forming a cohesive unit that worked seamlessly together. The days passed in a blur of activity. Charles and Elara focused on the ship repairs, while Rena and Zyla took turns scouting the area and foraging for supplies. Despite the looming threat, there was a sense of purpose and camaraderie that kept them going. One afternoon, Rena returned from a scouting mission with troubling news. "The agents are getting closer. They've set up a perimeter around the forest. We need to move quickly." Charles's mind raced. "We need a distraction, something to draw them away while we finish the repairs." Elara looked thoughtful. "We have a small device that can emit an electromagnetic pulse. It could disable their equipment temporarily, giving us the time we need." "Perfect," Charles replied. "We'll set it up tonight. Rena, Zyla, you'll handle the deployment. Elara and I will stay here and keep working on the ship." Night fell, and the forest was cloaked in darkness. Rena and Zyla moved silently through the trees, the device carefully concealed in Rena's pack. They reached the edge of the agent's perimeter, finding a spot where they could deploy the device without being seen. As they activated the EMP, a surge of energy pulsed through the air, disrupting the agent's equipment. Chaos ensued as the agents scrambled to restore their systems, giving Charles and Elara the window they needed. Back at the cave, Charles and Elara worked frantically, their hands moving in perfect synchronization. The ship's systems began to hum to life, the repairs holding steady. They were close, but time was running out. Rena and Zyla returned, their faces flushed with exertion. "The distraction worked, but it won't hold them for long," Rena reported. Charles nodded, his expression determined. "We're almost there. Just a little longer." The agents, recovering from the EMP, regrouped and resumed their search with renewed intensity. The forest was alive with the sound of their movements, drawing ever closer to the cave. Inside, the atmosphere was tense as Charles and the aliens made the final adjustments. The ship's engine roared to life, a triumphant sound that filled the cave with a sense of accomplishment. "We did it," Elara said, her voice tinged with relief. "We're ready to go." Charles allowed himself a brief smile. "Let's get you out of here." As they prepared to board the ship, the first beams of searchlights penetrated the darkness outside the cave. The agents were closing in, their determination palpable. "Go," Charles urged. "I'll hold them off." Elara shook her head. "No, you're coming with us. We won't leave you behind." Charles hesitated, but the resolve in Elara's eyes convinced him. They boarded the ship, the hatch sealing shut behind them. The engines roared, and the ship lifted off, breaking through the forest canopy and soaring into the sky. From the cockpit, Charles watched as the agents' searchlights faded into the distance. They were safe, for now. As the ship ascended, Charles couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. He had found a new purpose, a chance to protect and help others, and it filled him with a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The spaceship's interior was a blend of sleek alien design and the rugged practicality of a makeshift repair job. Charles Bennett took a moment to marvel at their success. They had done it, they had made the ship spaceworthy again. Elara, Rena, and Zyla worked efficiently at the control panels, their expertise evident in their precise movements. "How long until we're ready to jump?" Charles asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Elara glanced up, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and urgency. "Just a few more minutes. We need to ensure all systems are stable before we initiate the warp drive." Charles nodded, moving to the viewport. The Canadian wilderness stretched out below, serene and untouched. It was hard to believe that just beyond the tree-line, agents were closing in, their intent anything but peaceful. Rena's voice broke the quiet. "We're detecting increased activity on the ground. They're mobilizing in greater numbers. We need to leave now." Zyla, working on the ship's communications array, added, "I've set up a decoy signal to confuse their tracking. It should buy us a little more time." Charles felt a surge of gratitude. These aliens, once strangers, had become allies, their trust in him as strong as his trust in them. "Let's not waste it, then. Elara, initiate the launch sequence." The ship's engines roared to life, a deep hum that vibrated through the hull. Charles braced himself, the familiar rush of adrenaline mingling with a sense of calm. This was it, the culmination of their efforts and struggles. As the ship began to lift off, the agents below sprang into action. Searchlights crisscrossed the sky, and vehicles converged on their location. Charles watched as the ground receded, the agents' frantic movements becoming smaller and smaller. "We've cleared the immediate area," Elara announced, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Preparing to engage the warp drive." Just then, a sudden jolt rocked the ship. Charles grabbed onto a nearby console to steady himself. "What was that?" Rena's face was tight with concern. "They're trying to disable us with an electromagnetic pulse. We need to act fast." Elara's expression was grim but determined. "I'm overriding the safety protocols. This is going to be a rough jump." Charles took a deep breath. "Do it. We don't have a choice." The ship shuddered as the warp drive engaged. Stars stretched into lines of light as they hurtled through space, the sensation disorienting yet exhilarating. Charles clung to the console, his trust in the alien's expertise unwavering. After what felt like an eternity, the ship stabilized, the stars returning to their normal brilliance. They had made it. Charles let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "We're clear," Zyla reported, her voice tinged with relief. "We're out of their reach." Elara turned to Charles, her expression one of profound gratitude. "Thank you, Charles. We couldn't have done this without you." Charles shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "We did this together. Now, what's next? Rena stepped forward, her eyes bright with purpose. We need to find a place where we can regroup and plan our next steps. There are others like us, scattered and searching for peace. We need to bring them together. Charles nodded. And I'll be there to help. We can find a way to create something better. The aliens shared a look of agreement. First, we need to ensure our ship is fully operational, Alara said. Then, we'll start reaching out to our contacts. Over the next few days, the ship became a hive of activity. Repairs were finalized, systems optimized, and plans laid out for the future. Charles found himself integrating seamlessly into their routines, his skills and experience proving invaluable. One evening, as they shared a meal, Alara spoke up. We've located a potential safe haven, a remote planet that should be far from any conflict zones. It will take some time to reach, but it's our best option. Charles felt a renewed sense of purpose. Then let's get started. We have a lot of work ahead. The ship's engines hummed as they set course for their new destination. The journey would be long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time in a long while, Charles felt a deep sense of hope. They were not just running away from danger, they were moving toward a brighter future. As they cruised through the star-studded expanse, Charles reflected on how much his life had changed. From a solitary farmer seeking peace to an integral part of an interstellar mission, his journey had been extraordinary. And it was far from over.